The excitement after a great sales period seems to last for about a nanosecond before the worry about getting a new batch of leads kicks in. In this week's Hot Seat episode, Hunter's first launch landed him $17,000, but now post launch, he's worried about having a consistent flow of leads who are ready to buy now. He has a lot of assets to leverage, but is struggling to figure out which levers to pull. Jonathan helps Hunter work backwards in figuring out how to create opportunities to get in front of his ideal clients. That way, when he opens the door for more clients, he has a line of people ready to walk right on through. I'll be back at the end to recommend another episode. Enjoy.
Beautiful. So, Hunter, you're up first, man. If you can just quickly kind of go over who you are, who you work with, and what you really want to hit on for this hot seat, we can go from there.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on. So very open in regards to what we hit on for the hot seat. As far as really had the first chance I've had a chance to be in on one of these calls. But no, background is strength and conditioning, human performance. Was a Division I coach for 7 years at a couple major universities. Then I spent over a decade working in special operations. I was kind of on the ground floor with setting up a lot of those programs. And then now work with an organization that is training and teaching coaches within the military and veteran space. And so that's my day job. It's been amazing. Love it. Side stuff is then now what I'm building into. I had started my own business a number of years ago. No idea, wasn't scalable. Was doing remote programming and training, but not at a level. Had built it into a 6-figure business, but in a fashion that was taking way too much work, literally reinventing the wheel every time, programming, training, so many different demographics of clients. And it just got to a point, it just wasn't scalable. And so it kind of shut that down when I moved into my new role now.
Okay.
And now in a position, obviously going through, I just finished up, first 12-week signature, moving into the legacy program now.
Cool, man. So what do you want to talk about?
I mean, for me, it's how do I build up the business and really getting into that. I mean, so much of getting into the content creation, like completely understand and own and need to do a better job of doing, still hitting like a minimum of like 3 to 4 posts and creations a week. DMing, hitting kind of like my minimum a day, but still needing to generate more enrollment calls. Probably 60+% of closing. In the standpoint, if I get somebody on a call, obviously, it's at least 1 out of 2. And so by the chance to do that, went through my first launch, and had 15 to 17K within that month. So that was awesome. But now obviously post launch, how do I continue that? And then turning and burning, getting more of those enrollment calls and really actively those leads, so everything's not either cold or warm or red or yellow, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. And you're consistently creating more interested parties kind of as you go. I think what you hit on there is a very common thing. First launches often go very, very well. And then there's a bit of a dip. And it's not unreasonable for that to happen. Like inevitably, it's like the first book syndrome for an author, right? It's like you spend 10 years building up your stories, building up whatever for your first book, and then it does well. And then you're supposed to put out another one in a year and a half. Well, in this case, you're supposed to do another launch in a month. You can't be expected to recreate it. So the job then becomes some combination of, and this is, I think, what we'll talk about a little bit here. And I want to work backwards a bit with you, Hunter. But the job becomes some combination of doing the daily reps, which it sounds like you're doing, which might be the content, definitely the conversations. And sometimes it's going to feel like those are really easy, and sometimes it's going to feel like you're not getting any bites on those. What's important is that you keep at it day in and day out, because those start to compound upon one another, but it takes time for that to build up. But if that's all you do, it might take a little bit too long after the first launch or after the first even couple launches to start to build up into something meaningful. So what I really like doing is working backwards from the best clients you have and trying to create more of them. So I'm going to ask you then, Hunter, you can use a fake name if you want. You can use his or her real name. doesn't really matter. But if I had to ask you who your favorite person to work with right now is, and that could be, it's probably going to be some combination of somebody who pays you the most or, close to the most. And also they're just like great to work with in every sense of the word. Generally, it's the same person or close to the same person in almost every case. But who is it?
A guy named Mike.
Tell me about Mike. What does he do?
So former special operations. A lot of the people that I pulled in from my leads were people that I had relationships with for over 10 years.
Cool.
And so a lot of it was just built in trust. And so, but somebody who basically kind of signature program, communicates consistently, trains hard, does all the things, like he makes everything easy, so to speak. But does it with a smile on his face. Extremely grateful, very communicative. So yeah, it makes everything easy, but because of the gratitude on the backside of that, it makes it worth it as well.
Is this somebody that you knew beforehand then? Like this is somebody you
It
knew
is.
from your time in the military?
It is.
Okay.
Yep.
How did you reconnect with him?
It was literally like my spear post call to action. Like
Okay.
the number of people that I probably got 100 to 120 people that responded to that, as far as literally direct call to action, DM me, I'm in, so to speak.
Yeah.
And like it did, half of which recognized like, oh wow, Hunter's actually taking on people now. And we're like, oh, you want volunteers? And the other people were actually interested in becoming clients. And so a combination of that and I guess kind of my elevator pitch. He's like, dude, I'm 30 plus years old. I'm looking to get out. I want to build muscle. I want to move better and perform across life. That is exactly who I am. This spoke to me, and that reopened it in that door.
Is he still in the military? Is he still special
He
ops?
is not.
Or is he left? He's
He's
left.
not.
So what does he do now?
He is in school, but working just for an organization for kind of a day job business.
Okay. Is that common with people you work with, that they are ex-military and
Yes. Yeah, very much high performers that did a lot of things at that level and are now stepping into using those skill sets outside of that within higher level business, financial, and doing some of that. Yeah.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. There's a lot of organizations that serve ex-special ops, ex-military, and help them get back into society. I mean, I know that I know there's a lot of psychological things to come over too. Just you were part of a tight family, now you're not part of a family. Like there's just a lot of things that
Yep.
people deal with. Is that something that interests you? Is that kind of I don't know what the right word is. I'm sure that there's a term for it, but going back into society after military, what's the term for that?
I mean, yeah, it's transition's the big one. And that's who
Okay.
I work with in my day job, as far as literally helping those that are taking the uniform off to help provide careers, fitness, and everything, outside of that, because obviously there's a huge part of your identity that
Yeah.
is associated that when you're doing that for long term. And so, a place where I'm at is to be able to, like I've always been a civilian though, and due to the trust and the relationship that I'd built within those men and women, to be able to see behind the curtain. And so for me to then step in and do this, it allowed me to already have that relationship, that trust and everything built to where I had been working with them. I had been coaching, training them. And now the fact that they have left that organization, they're still wanting the coaching. They have families. They still want to be able to do all the things, is kind of where I stepped in.
You're coaching. Do you coach them through the transition as well, or is it's purely
No.
physical?
Yeah, so day job stuff is literally teaching them how to become coaches, and not just like how to pass the certification. It's how do you establish rapport, how to communicate, how do you utilize your leadership skills, and understanding like that is the power in actually what coaching is obviously anybody in a position to change a life is a coach. And so how do we focus that and get them to understand this is what goes into being, whether it's a good personal trainer, good strength and conditioning coach, whatever that looks like.
Yeah. Man, there's something there. There's something there. I'm thinking about I'm thinking about all of the people and organizations involved in this, between, from the companies that want to hire, ex-military and all of the HR people there,
Mhm.
to all of the associations helping with the transition, to all of the people who are exiting the military and wondering what their next moves are. I mean, the top of my head right now, and I don't know if this is something that interests you, but the top of my head right now is a podcast around this would be killer. And the podcast title was literally Transition. I mean, Transition with Hunter.
Mhm.
I mean, also your first name is perfect for
Yeah.
it, by the way. but uh but transition, and what you do there is you use it as a combination of networking and education. It would be so easy for you then to reach out to all of the people in charge of the organizations that help people transition into civilian life and interview them, because now you have a podcast. And you don't even need a it doesn't matter if the podcast is new or not.
Yep.
But now you have an hour conversation with these people and you have a relationship with them. And in very short order, you're going to have an unbelievable Rolodex. And you're going to be the go-to for this. You're going to be the obvious choice for what you do. Your social media content then naturally comes from that, right? You're just sharing insights that you're getting from the podcast, like you're creating the content. You can
Mhm.
even probably hire somebody else to pull out the best insights and clips and stuff from it, and that's your social media. And then you're doing the spear posts, but I mean, you could easily do 4 or 5 episodes a week here, where you're interviewing people who have transitioned and what they've learned, the 5 things. I mean, there are probably major CEOs who have transitioned out of special ops, and you can get him on here. It's like the CEO of this Fortune 500 company, what he wishes he knew when he transitioned.
Mhm.
Oh my God, man, killer. And of course, in that podcast, you have interstitial advertisements for your coaching services. Your ad is literally like a spear post that you just read.
Mhm.
And the same thing in the podcast feed, but you're creating your social content out of that. And you're also making it very, very clear as you're speaking to all these people. I mean, some of them, if they're like the CEO, might be a client, but other people, it's just a matter of you becoming the choice, you becoming the obvious choice for this. Man, how does that feel? There's something there. I don't know whether it's a podcast. Thanks, Casey. I don't know whether it's a podcast, but I think a podcast, like I love to use podcasts for this.
Mhm.
I mean, I talk about this in the book that's coming out a lot about how media to become famous in the media is very different than media to build a business.
Yep.
And so a podcast to become a famous podcaster is a very different type of podcast than a podcast to build a business.
Yep.
Where you use this podcast to become what I call famous to the family.
Yeah, and it's no, I mean it definitely lands. I mean the biggest piece like that comes to mind is like I have one non-compete, and that is educational within the veteran space within my day job organization.
Okay.
So it's would be circumnavigating that would not hold up because there's some other things that I'm not going to get into now. But like I've got a solid Rolodex in regards to I've been around, like I know high level generals, I know some people. I've got one client that charges where I've charged 4K a month right now, who is Fortune 5 company that I work with individually. So I've got different pieces, and I don't say this like it feels weird or feels arrogant for me
Yeah,
to
you've
share
put in
this,
the
but
work. You've put in the work.
it's so I've got those pieces. It's now like learning to leverage properly.
What
so
if
to
you
speak.
what if you went to the company that you do your day job with and say, I want to do this podcast, and you offer it to them as a promotional tool for them. You put the logo on the picture and you say, produced by.
Yeah, there's going to be some rub there.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
some stuff.
Okay. I mean, I guess I don't know how to navigate that because I don't know what the non-compete is, but there's something there
Yeah.
with working backwards from those communities.
hmm
If you can't do anything educational, though, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough because then you can't even do any content in that space either, right?
I can. There's. It can be done. It can be done. And that's trust me, I'm not resisting right now or trying to be combative when it comes to I'm thinking as well. So
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's continue this conversation.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of really neat opportunities there, and I think there's a big market there. But everything that's going through my head has to do with some sort of education.
Okay.
And the easiest way to do that is actually the least scalable, which are these one-on-one conversations, and then you use those to create your content out of.
hmm
And you can do it a combination, of course, of people actively going through this versus people who have successfully navigated it and kind of what they learned and what they wish they knew. But
Yep.
let's continue this conversation, Hunter.
Yeah. I look
Thanks.
forward to it. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
You got it.
Amber again, thanks for listening in. This episode was from a group call from Jonathan's online trainer mentorship, where we host hot seats every 2 weeks. The mentorship is where we take anyone doing from $1,000 to $20,000 a month or more and help them scale up. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in learning more about, please DM the word mentor to Jonathan on Instagram at @itscoachgoodman. If you're looking for another episode to listen to right now, I'd recommend episode 110, Simple and Consistent Lead Generation. The feast or famine cycle of lead generation isn't the roller coaster ride you want to be on. In this episode, you'll learn the purpose of your social media channels and your newsletter, a blueprint to create the perfect ethical bribe, and what to do and say after someone opts into your ethical bribe. Again, that's episode 110, Simple and Consistent Lead Generation. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next week.